You must get an AI to do it.
Yeah, hi everybody, and welcome to the 10th AI for Education webinar. This is a dialogue session. My name is Tom Barrett, and I'm really grateful that you're joining us, whether you're joining us live or you're catching up with these recordings later on. It's fantastic that you're investing in your AI literacy, and I'm joined with by an illustrious set of guests today. I got myself up early this morning. I'm here in Australia. I'm actually in the future, so if you're in the US or some of the other time zones, you're still in Wednesday. I'm in Thursday. The future is bright, I can tell you that. So I'm really grateful to be joined by Alec and Shelly, who will do a little intro in a second. I'm just going to begin by just sharing a acknowledgement of country. And so I acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I join you from today. They're also this is the lands where I've been kind of designing and planning and exploring some of these topics too. I recognize their continuing connection and stewardship of lands, waters, communities, and learning. I pay my respects to the Indigenous elders, past, present, and those who are rising. Sovereignty here has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I also extend acknowledgement to the lands you're joining from today. We've got a great opportunity to connect and learn together, share some stories, and engage in some dialogue about these important topics. And I hope we can work together creatively to design a better future for our students and for our teachers that we're working with. So I'd like to just bring in Alec and Shelly. And so, Shelly, you got to start us off just by saying hi, where you are, and just get a little bit of a background and context about some of the work that you do.
Hi, I'm so happy to be in this conversation with two gurus of mine. So I just want to say hi to everyone too. I'm coming from Texas, and recently I've been working as a teacher with middle school students in elementary in Texas, Houston, and San Antonio. And then I'm also an author, and I regularly train teachers as an Edtech trainer.
Great, fantastic, Shelly. You're very welcome. It's great to be connecting with you. I'm not sure about the guru status though. Let's not put out. We're all just trying to figure this out, right? I think it goes back both ways. though. Hey, Shelly, I know that you've done amazing work over the years, and we've been connected. Actually, we've all been connected. In our recent lives, past lives, in lots of different ways around educational technology and kind of trying to create great opportunities with technology. And so, Shelly, you're really welcome. Looking forward to learning from you today. Alec, Couros, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here with you and Shelly. I'm coming from Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional territories of the Nehewak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I'm very proud to work and have a life on these lands. I'm excited to be here today. This is really an important topic. I know we're going to get right into the questions, but it's been great to have been connected for so long with the two of you, and yet it seems to get better and better and more interesting all the time. There's always new things that come down the road, and so the area of EdTech and education in general has changed a lot over the times that we've all sort of circumnavigated it, and I'm excited about this particular time in our lives and the time in education.
Yeah. Alec, thank you. Alec, tell us a little bit about your position at the university.
Sure, I'm the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. So I work with faculty across disciplines to look at the enhancement of pedagogy in various ways, from indigenization to technology enhancement to inclusion to UDL to all aspects of teaching improvement, from retention and recruitment strategies, et cetera. That's my day job. I'm a consultant, of course, a speaker, and do that sort of thing quite regularly as well. My base job is I'm a professor of education in my area is educational technology and media.
Great. particularly interested in your work around your interest and study and exploration of different types of media. So because of the kind of impacts that we're seeing, and also some of the photos that you've been sharing, we should see if we could get into that later. Great to see Jen Robertson joining from your neck of the woods as well on the chat. So please say hi in the chat. If you're joining us live, say where you are from, say share the lands, acknowledge the place where you are, and tell us, where you are. That'd be great to kind of see you connect. And so let's just talk about our session. So these are not the kind of usual, presentation style webinars. What you've got yourself involved in is a more of a dialogue session. So it's a little bit less structured back and forth presentations and slides. I have a range of provocations and questions which which we as a panel will be exploring, and so that includes me in that mix too. We'll be on the screen for about an hour talking through some of these key ideas and exploring the topic of AI for education. Lois, great to see you joining from Colorado. Welcome, and so please say hello where you're from in the chat. If you've got questions for us, please throw them in there. There's no guarantee we'll kind of get to them, but we'll certainly kind of scan across and see if we can weave them in. There is a recording and resources will be sent to everybody who was signed up. There's no need to worry about an awkward breakout room or a microphone being on or whatever's going on where you are, so you can sit back and relax, and just sort of immerse yourself in the conversation and throw some questions into the chat. On the left-hand side, this circular diagram is a set of protocols for us in terms of the way that we hold this space for dialogue. I also this is me saying it directly to Alec and Shelly as well, just to make sure that you know what's expected of you. So we're going to be hard on the content and we're going to be soft on the people. And so we're going to ask the tough questions, but we're going to be kind to each other in the effort to do that. We're going to grasp the nettle, but we're going to make sure that we're kind to the people who are part of this dialogue. We're going to give each other kind, specific, and helpful feedback, which you may notice is from Ron Berger's work at Expeditionary Schools. He talks about this sort of idea of being very specific, kind, and helpful in terms of the way that we give critique to each other. I also encourage Shelly and Alec, want you to step up and share your ideas, but also notice how you might sort of need to step back to allow somebody else to kind of step up and bring their thinking. Stepping up for you online, if you're there, is to say hi and say where you're from and ask your questions. You might like to respond to the questions that you'll see up on the screen too. And the last protocol is Ting, the Chinese traditional character for listening, which is reminding us to listen in lots of different ways. So we listen with 10 eyes. We listen with one heart. And so this idea of listening with real purpose and being really immersed and present in what we're experiencing together. And then the left side of the character talks about wrapping your ear around the king. And so treating the speaker like royalty. And so that's easy to do when you don't have a microphone, which is fine. So you can, but that's certainly something that Alec and Shelly, I'd like you to try to do your best with as well. And so, so those are our protocols. That's our session. We'll be running for about 50 more minutes. And we'll see if we can kind of squeeze in some questions at the end. Welcome, Aaron from Iowa, evening. So it's evening for you, Aaron. It is morning for me. So Melbourne, we are just kicking off. And, like I say, the future is bright. So Alec and Shelly, thank you for starting us off with a little bit of background. But actually, Shelly, I'd like to come to you first and just sharing a little bit more about what's going on with AI for you. Give us a bit of a practical snapshot of how AI is sort of shaping your kind of work, whether that's in your own professional, work flow, or whether that's within the communities that you're working with. Give us some of the kind of practical sense of what's going on for you.
So I'm going to start with the kids because I work with middle school, and with any kind of technology, they think it's cool. It's great. You can fake Kanye voice, and they like that. It's really but for them, they don't really know how to use it. They haven't exactly used it yet. So I would say for kids right now, it's just kind of a new thing. They haven't gotten to dive. The other point about that is that in a lot of schools here, unfortunately in Texas, we ban a lot of things, but they actually did open it up towards the end of the semester for the students. So now is a great opportunity where we can actually, get into it and have students actually use it.
Okay.
As far as working in, I would like to say from the U.S., the impact is already there for a lot of different communities. So I think more adults are more concerned because they see there's already a lot of jobs. We have a strike with actors already, writers, and you've seen, and some of it has to do with AI and all of its impacts. So that's kind of been my experience here.
Yeah. And so did you say there that it's just recently been unblocked? What particular tool was that, Shelly?
Chat GPT. I mean, we do have machine learning. We do have machine learning with code.org, and in a lot of different schools will allow machine learning, but to actually use the AI tools, any kind of AI tool, you will go and it'll just be blocked. You actually have to take several steps, work with the technology specialist at the school and have them unblock it. But if you say it's AI, they don't necessarily do that. But now our district, and it's one of the district that serves one of the lower economic situations here in San Antonio. They've actually opened it up without us having to really ask. So that's really cool.
That's good. I'm interested in maybe us kind of circling back to some of the issues there around blocking and equity and access, which has always been a bit of an issue. So yeah, I can remember writing something about YouTube being blocked for me, open for you type of thing, and how that kind of creates disparity in terms of access. Alec, give us a practical snapshot of how things are shaping up for you.
Sure, I'll speak more to post-secondary than K-12. Certainly, Shelly can speak to that. I have some insight in that area as well. But I think in the post-secondary world, we're seeing across universities, and I've been working with quite a few, we're seeing stacks of papers that seem to be of a level of academic misconduct or perceived academic misconduct. We have companies like turnitin.com who have turned on their AI and automatically in the post-secondary sector. Many faculty, many senates, councils, looking to establish guidelines. Obviously being careful to be cautious of faculty autonomy, but looking at what type of guidelines we might have for AI, whether we should put explicit instructions in syllabi. I think that's certainly something with transparency, providing better education to students, because there's a difference between a student willfully using ChatGPT to put in an essay and claim that it's theirs, versus using Bing and not perhaps knowing that's Chat or that's GPT as well, and using it as a resource and perhaps not fully understanding that maybe using it for an outline is a bit too much, or maybe putting in a final final paper from then and attributing it to yourself is also a bit of an issue as well. So trying to provide better education, because without the better education, there's always more doubt in terms of student intent in terms of assignments. And of course, faculty are taking it up, using it for assessment, using it for instruction, for communications, in every aspect. And there's a bit of a duplicity of use, I guess, in some ways. At one time you're saying not to use it, but at the same time people are finding the utility in it, using it quite heavily in many cases, and just trying to make sense of all of this. For the first time I see faculty saying, I'm not going to do an essay anymore. Like, I have to do away with this. I have to come up with something else. And I think that'll lead up onto the second point, but ultimately starting to consider assessment in a different way, and trying to realize how difficult that might be, because you've done the same things for your entire career. If I think of my entire career, trying to figure out. I don't think the term is great. AI proof is something AI proof assignments. I don't think it's a great term, but it's an interim term for now. So, which of my assignments would be AI proof, if any, and does that even make any sense to phrase it that way? So I think we have some thinking to do in higher ed and K-12, and even at the point of entrance exams. Like, who do we admit? Are those entrance exam essays worth anything anymore, or were they ever worth anything at any time? So it's a lot of that, doubting the practices that have come before and realizing that we need to change.
Yeah, interesting. The question around utility is one I've been sort of thinking a little bit about, like how when utility kind of is really, really high, whether that then means that we're making different decisions. It starts to kind of shift us away from a kind of a base which kind of helps us to discern better and engage kind of our critical thinking when something is just so capable and so able to alleviate maybe pressures which we feel. So I think it's just interesting, that thing that we see, which we're going to continue to see, the increased utility. The other thing you talk about is how ubiquitous this technology is and how it's very difficult to kind of track. It's not just ChatGPT, and how it's been around for a long time and is one of the challenges and is a key characteristic of this technology is its ubiquity, which makes it difficult for us to kind of understand and work with in the same sort of way. Let's talk a little bit about disruption. We've all three of us have been working with education technology for a long time, and this is a question I kind of share with all of the different panels. So all the 10 different dialogue sessions, we've typically explored this question. And also, this is a good opportunity if you're just joining us. I can see a few people joining us from in the chat. Mary Beth, welcome. It's great to see you, and Lois and Alan as well. Trish Powers joining as well from Kanaland of in Adelaide, South Australia. If you haven't already, jump on and just have a think about this question. So this particular disruption that we're experiencing, and we're still seeing that, I think there's still plenty more chapters to go in this disruption story that we're in the early days of it. But what does it feel different? And I just want you to pay attention to that language there in terms of what I'm asking, for us as practitioners in this field. Shelly, I'm going to come to you first. How does it feel? How does this time in terms of education technology feel different to you?
Well, I think I might take it a little to the extreme. So, but I'll do that in a bit. But I do believe that it's different because I feel now a lot of people have experienced what it's, the data privacy, just all the unethical decisions that have been made with different types of technology. And we see this distrust with any new technology. We see how even if we the movies open Heimer, and then just seeing how people are really concerned, like, what does this mean for the future? If we look back, are we going to feel proud of ourselves? Are we going to look back at this history? And I even go back to, I was having a discussion the other day about the Industrial Revolution and how we had all of this great technology coming out, and now we have climate change. So I feel like everyone is feeling it everywhere. Your data, you don't even have a choice. There isn't data privacy. There is no protection. And I really feel that that's why this new thing, which I do feel like it's very powerful, but we've had powerful technology before that. People now really are aware of the impacts.
Yes. Yeah. It makes me think about the way that we walked into the social media sort of shifts and change. And a lot of people are drawing comparisons, aren't they, between that sort of how that established itself and maybe the lack of discernment and awareness and planning and thinking ahead of time about the potential harms. And I suppose if there is a disruptive technology, we should recognize that there's potential negative downsides too. So interesting to kind of see how those things will play out. Alec, how about you? How does this feel different to you?
Well, I go back to my early career, and my teaching career started in 1993, and that was just right at the beginning of this internet thing that we had. And I still have early videos of me talking about the disruption that was happening at the time. And I think things obviously changed, but I think looking ahead, we're going to have even more distinct and much broader changes. And that, that extends into, the early 2000s with blogs and wikis and social media in 2004, 2005. That was another big disruption. But, if you take something like, SAMR, for instance, or even the term technology enhanced learning, we've been focused on enhancing learning with technology for such a long time. I'll just throw a link in the chat if anyone wants to look at that, just the image of SAMR, if you don't know what that one is. But SAMR, typically has been, you've got substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. And I think for the most part, almost all technology enhanced learning was kind of in the first couple of zones. And I feel like when we're thinking that, we actually have to rethink all of the assignments that we've ever taught, that we have to do things absolutely 100% different. We're smack dab and stuck and locked in this redefinition zone that we have to redefine with technology, what we're doing in the classroom. And when we talk about redefinition, it's not just fixing all the assessments and making them AI proof or whatever it might be. It might be looking at competition quite differently. Like, what does it mean when if you're all, working against each other for grades, and the whole system is rigged on, systems. Of course, everyone's going to use AI because you're going against people who are using AI. It's no different than the Olympics and people using steroids in that sense. So of course, you're going to use technologies that help you with your competitive edge. So the choice of whether to use AI or not, and plus as it becomes more ubiquitous, it's no longer your choice at some point. So how do we rethink the education systems as they are, this competitive rank and file system? How do we look differently at assessments? How do we look at different instruction? How do we look particularly at personalized learning? Like, how do we use AI to work quite closely with students to give them rapid and timely feedback? The thing that we've been missing, and that's been more difficult to do because of the burden on teachers with all of the other administrative trivia that we do all the time. So how do we actually break free from some of the constraints of what we've always known is better, like a better education? But how do we actually do it this time? So I think people are actually talking about these things for the first time in a very long time, in a very deep and disruptive manner. So that's why I think this is different. Everything else was enhanced. This is all about disruption. This is all about redefinition, redefining education as it is.
What do you think to that, Shelly?
Well, I think also part of that is with the disruption that you were talking about is also the fake news that we're worried about, because more people are also seeing that. They're seeing, like, as part of the actors, and one of their concerns was, you can use AI images of me, my AI voice, and we have already seen that with the music. And so I think another part of that too, and all those great things you're talking about, is also attribution, or how do we're using all these tools to come up with images and ideas, and all the people that added to that, Pablo Picasso or any of the greats, none of them are going to be mentioned to the students, like, hey, we got this, the machine took all this learning from this period and that artist and that, and it's all getting missed. And now people are seeing, like, those people don't get any kind of even respect of knowledge, but also more people are seeing, hey, there's a potential that in my industry they're going to take my face or my work or my voice. And I think that's really, really concerning people as well, and having to teach students that too. Like, how do you do this in a respectful way that doesn't take all this years of work and then just disregard it, say it's ChatGPT who gave you all these ideas?
Yes, the issues around what is true and what is real, the shifting nature of that in terms of how much and especially on the kind of as we kind of move potentially as us, adolescent students are kind of, still engaged so heavily in these social networks, and the use of AI within a social network is is also interesting to kind of track carefully. And so paying attention to how these big social tech are using AI to amplify some of their existing mechanics, I think is really important. Alan's talking here about opaqueness as well, which is another characteristic, which is a really important one to recognize. The total black box, as Mary Beth speaks about. So again, these characteristics make it very, very different. So we're not dealing with installing smart boards or trying to get kids to collaborate on a Google Doc. It's a very different type of technology. I just want to come back to your point, Alec, about redefinition and just how everything is being redefined, probably around this in a societal level. We're kind of asking these sort of questions, and so it's not just a education specific disruption. And maybe that's one of the key things here, is that at a societal level there's like major change and disruption, redefinition, and in education, I think we've got to have mechanisms to move quicker. I think we've got to be able to be more responsive and flexible, but ensuring that we obviously maintain the safety and stewardship that is so important in terms of our roles within these ecosystems. I think that you can't keep, one of the interesting things about ChatGPT was how it was just released into the world just to see, almost like to see what would happen. And that kind of idea that, they'll learn as they go. And I think, but that's never felt and sat right with educators. And so, our kind of discerning, sort of steady approach to things doesn't quite match the societal disruption that we're seeing. And so that disparity is an important one to kind of think carefully about, is how do we respond effectively, quickly, in a flexible way without obviously shifting our kind of the important things that we kind of are at the base of this. And that asks us, maybe leads us into the next couple of questions, which this one's deliberately provocative, but there's a lot of assumption here that just because it's got great utility that we should be using it. But let's explore, maybe Alec, I'll start with you. Maybe let's just explore what's the merits of actually using it at all, and why it's so important maybe also to have that question at the beginning and not just to assume that we're using it. What are your thoughts about this provocation, Alec?
There's a couple of layers to it. Should we be using it? I think it does have some creative merits, more so than we often give it credit for. And I think that's a debate that we see, whether this is creative, whether it's in photography, image generation, video, text, whatever it might be. I think there is not so much the creativity in the product, but creativity in the way that the user interfaces or works with the tool. I think that's where the creativity lies. And with the back and forth with prompting and so on, there's certainly some creativity. So I think it's an incredible tool. It's an incredible tool for personalized learning and prompting and tutoring. So I think there's many reasons in education why we should be using it. In general, we shouldn't be using it to some extent if we do not use it in a way that protects humanity in a number of ways. And we can just start at the sort of societal disruption aspect of everything. If we use it and we do not at the same time decide to stick up for each other in terms of the workplace, in terms of being replaced at workplace, if we at some point when the workplace does change significantly, we should be vying for and supporting things like UBI, universal basic income, other societal and financial and economic mechanisms to create and to compensate for the disruption that this will absolutely create. That corporations that are not employing AI should be taxed at a much higher rate to support social programs. So unless we are doing those things, we should not be using AI. So if we can support those things, I fully, and not just those things, but looking at privacy, thinking about the writer's strike or the sort of the Hollywood strike that's going on right now, and thinking about the real repercussions of how that affects education. I mean, some of the issues are down the road, if I want I don't know how many episodes of Seinfeld, but if I want another episode of Seinfeld, or they did this to South Park the other day, where they developed 7, I think, new episodes, and basically they have a tool that you can create as many South Park episodes as you'd like. It's not released, but it's a proof of concept, and you can put yourself in it. So what does that mean for those people who put their heart and souls and their lives into acting and their careers in that? What does that mean for their rights? And how is that not going to somehow trickle down to education, where we can just be simply replaced out? We've already heard of professors, who have, or students who have realized that their professor had been deceased for years while they're taking a course with these people. You've seen articles like that. So when we think about education and video and our intellectual property and our relationships with students, unless we support Hollywood and support other industries as well, we're going to get it in education, and it'll be much worse here. So yes, we should be using it in education. We should be using it in other aspects of the workplace, but we should not be using it unless we support others in protecting our rights and freedoms and our security and privacy, all of the other things that are really important in all of this.
Yeah. I appreciate you referencing the kind of other parts of our society that are shifting and responding, and how that's connected. We're not, I think one of the challenges for us is often we're in our educational bubble, and we kind of see that, it kind of operates in a different way, disconnected from what's going on. And so when we kind of zoom out and recognize that we're part of a broader ecosystem, a healthier ecosystem is responding to change in other parts of that ecosystem. And so I think that's a really helpful thing. And, a useful thing to think through is that those responses from different industries have a, maybe not direct, but certainly have an indirect order of effect on what's going on within our classrooms, within our kind of colleges, and with our teachers and our students. And so interesting to think about how that will ripple through in terms of creativity and how we make things of value that people desire or want be part of. Be fascinating to kind of track some of those other stories that we're seeing in terms of the effect on education. Alec, thank you for sharing. Shelly, do you want to jump in here? You've talked already a little bit about privacy and, from a student's perspective. Anything else you want to share here about whether we should be using this?
Yes, and I want to go back to what Alec was saying earlier about the way where teachers are rethinking assessment and all their assignments. And one of the things I found working with different teachers with AI is it really saves them time. So I want to say professionally, I think we should use it, because teachers there's such a burden in the teaching industry, education industry. There's just so much that they have to handle, and used in a great way can just really help them professionally and have more time with their families and wellness, if the different tools and everything are used right. On the other part, I really like also what you talked about, Tom, about it, and I think that's such a key phrase. Like, it doesn't sit well with us, any technology that isn't being shared with students and us questioning with students how we're using it. Because I definitely believe like the only way that students are going to even build their own moral compass of how to use a technology is really by allowing them to use it, even make some mistakes, but with a teacher, facilitator at hand to make them question, maybe not tell them, hey, but how to think about it, but raising those questions, those case studies. How do you think Kanye feels when, felt, or let's look at his tweets, or, whatever he says, Dre, all of them, when that was used. Yeah, we think it's cool. It went viral, but let's look at the artist. Let's put yourself in that shoes. Or for them to look at the case. There's a lot of writers, there's a lot of newspapers, e-zines, all of that failing because they're hiring for AI. And so I definitely think, it doesn't sit well. And if we help our students to, along the way, every step of the way, that hopefully they will make better decisions. And we already see policy. Alec was talking about a lot of great policies that I wish in the United States we would use. Unfortunately, you know, they don't really care about social welfare here. So for me, it's really getting the next generation to really care about these issues and helping others and making companies responsible, like you said, about the taxing and all these other different really important policies that I don't even know if I know they're making policies now about it, and it's more about banning. You know, let's ban it in these areas or in every university, and it's just very extreme, not well thought of one. So I really like those points you brought up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that we've got to get better at is how do we show that our creative work has been amplified with these technologies? So I'm talking specifically about attribution, which you mentioned, Shelly. You know, how do we get better at actually attributing that kind of type of collaboration? And I think that I saw recently somebody referring to how academics have had a lot of human amplification in their own kind of publishing. And there was a list of all the different ways that people would write papers amplified by human support, which they didn't disclose, or they don't need to disclose. And I think that idea of this is my creative output and it was created in these ways, and I've had amplification and support, augmentation from these different tools and these different kind of methods. I think trying to tell that story as part of the creative output, I think, is really important. So trying to find practical ways. So you talk about policy, which always potentially feels like it's at kind of arm's length, it's away from us, and it's not something that we can necessarily control. We might input into it, but we might not necessarily be able to kind of directly affect it. But I think the practical frameworks that educators are kind of wrapping around how does a student share in a with positive intent how their creative output has been augmented, like tell that story, I think is so important. I think that citations, for example, like citing ChatGPT is just like such a low level, you know, it's like an old method for an absolutely disrupted and redefined kind of process. So we need better practical frameworks for trying to manage that and tell that story. So I think it's just interesting how we're going to see attribution and provenance, all those types of ideas being, you know, playing an important role in where we head next, especially around creativity. I actually saw a recent paper, I think you might have noticed it, that was explaining how, you know, we probably know this already, but GPT-4, the large language model, when it's obviously asked to generate ideas, is able to do so much more. It's almost 40 times more productive than some of the most capable students who were part of the study. And it's just interesting to think about that idea that we'll just eventually, you know, it'll just be normalized that we're using these technologies, but how it stresses other parts of the creative process, such as attribution or such as discernment and filtering, and you know, whether I use this idea or not. You know, access and generation of ideas is not going to be a question. It's actually what we do with them that counts the most. Alec, have you got any kind of thoughts about some of that work around attribution and provenance? I'd be interested to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on the side of things. I'm looking at a lot of things directly right into it. I've always been, of course, a big advocate of attribution as the most important things, especially within the Creative Commons framework. So I care less about property and ownership and of artifacts, and much more about where do you get your ideas from. And that's always been, I've been sort of pushed back against, you know, citation systems like MLA and APA, because they're oppressive to some extent when all you really need to know is like who had this idea and how do we give attribution to them, not just so that we can give them credit, but also to have a two-way flow or a many-way flow of ideas going back and forth with those ideas and advancing those ideas even more. And that's what attribution is really, for me, the most important piece. It's advancing the ideas themselves and you know, building on ideas. So you know, if someone does something with my work and they reference me or cite me or at me or whatever it might be, I get to learn from those people who have taken my work even further. And so that to me is really important. In an AI framework, I mean, obviously that's difficult, because going back to Alan's comment, there's so much of a black box here. We don't know where these ideas are coming from. We'll get glimpses of that when you get the odd watermark on a Midjourney image or something like that, where you kind of get a sense of where this maybe comes from, or if there's some resonance of a stylistic piece within the images. Text is much more difficult to find, of course, unless you provide a particular stylistic quality to your writing. You're not going to necessarily know where that's from, and that's always been the case in writing. I don't think that's changed a whole lot. And obviously, with video production and image production, that is becoming much more of an issue. And why you're seeing, those residents of those domains becoming quite outright and upset about what's happening to their livelihood and to the attribution and credit that they should get. So I think there's some really bad practices with OpenAI and those who are unlawfully or just not licensing materials that they're using and providing proper attribution and credit and compensation to those who they're wholesale stealing ideas from. So there are some big issues ahead, certainly.
Yeah. I've been sort of toying with that kind of idea of what can we control ourselves? So if we're publishing, like, how can we show the story of AI within the things that we create, with positive intent? So I still think there's work to be done there, in terms of experimenting as ourselves as creators and publishers, trying to find that balance. Because I was thinking through, for example, if I write an article and at the very top it says to you as a reader that this is 60% kind of augmented with AI tools, does that change your experience of reading those ideas? Or if I place it at the very end, which is the rug pull kind of classic, some of this was written by AI, does that change your experience if it begins or it ends with that type of information? And I think those are the sort of things we've got to figure out, is like, how do we, because it changes the way those ideas are potentially experienced. It changes your experience as an audience. So I think trying to understand
I'll give you an example, Tom. I think a very important example on this is, had you written that treaty land acknowledgement by AI, I would have thought that was a terrible idea, because you need to live those experiences and understand those. If my introduction would have been via AI, and you would have acknowledged me as being bright or whatever it might have been, I would have thought, Tom, I would have been quite upset by the idea. So sincere thoughts and ideas, and things that you have to live through to experience those ideas, they need to come from the pen. They need to come from you. And I think there's some areas where I think, research papers and so on, on certain topics for certain projects, I think there's a place for those. But when it comes to really intimate knowledge of ideas, I think we have to, decide to go a bit more manual on those forms of idea creation. So I think there are some real deep sensitivities around a lot of what we produce. So it's not, I don't think it's it's not an exception in all cases, but I think we have to be very thoughtful about what is the audience, what is the purpose, where do these ideas come from, and can they really be captured by some sort of black box AI collective of all ideas that have ever been put forward on to humankind. So I think there are many things to consider here. Sorry to interrupt.
No need to apologize. We saw recently a whole Reddit group trying to change, I think it was a gaming kind of group who were trying to include a kind of completely fictitious feature within a game and then see it within a written article. And so they were trying to game that whole system of putting fake stuff into the published world and then see if an AI generated article about the game would reference that fictitious feature. And exactly, they managed to get that through. So, I think just that idea of where these ideas are coming from, publishing, attribution, these systems are going to be continually stressed as we try to figure out what does creativity mean, that is augmented and amplified, how intricate and nuanced that combination and type of collaboration is. And I think this also then leads us to talk a little bit about some of the harm that is already being potentially caused by kind of blindly walking into some of this. And I think that, so if you know of the documentary Social Dilemma, the authors of that, I think it's Tristan Harris, talks a lot about how, and there's I found a great little lecture from him and his co-founder talking about AI and like making the comparison. So I'll find that and share that with you afterwards. But I think just the importance of us recognizing the potential harms and the risk at this early stage in regards to AI, which we potentially didn't and definitely did not see coming when we were kind of engaging in social networks. So this is the idea. So here's a question for you, Shelly. So what risks and what harms are you worried about paying attention to? When we say second order effects, we're obviously looking at the kind of ripple. It might be indirect. It might not be straight up front. We might not see it, but it might be down the road. It might be an indirect harm that we need to pay attention to. What sort of things are on your radar at the moment, Shelly?
Well, I really like what Alec brought up about the companies and the fact that we never held any of them accountable. We never had any, ethical points or issue. If in research you see that they're using cells or anything scary, then the community cries out. The community is already with the standards, but a lot of these, the image, the voice, all of that was just released with no kind of ethical obligation or even regulated and maybe not regulated, but some kind of let's pay attention to this. And so it's already out there, the ability to do voiceovers, the ability to create things and not have artists. CNN recently came out with a blog that a lot of people noticed. It had a tiny byline under the title and it said completely written by AI. So we know they already took a job, and that was a big thing in the news for a while too. And just the fact that some of the actors said that one of their biggest concerns was, and the writers was, they got a completely written AI script and were told, make it better. And so that was all these hours that they didn't get paid for, and then they had to work with something taken from a machine. There wasn't even someone to collaborate with. And so I think those are some of the issues. And, I like also what Alec was saying about, our experiences and what we do. But some of the things also that I've thought about, because I'm going more in the Midjourney art, I'm trying to create a children's book based on my daughter and my stories we've been telling since she was little. And I'm not such a great artist, but we have all these ideas. I know what that world looks like. And so I'm getting that world for the pictures. And I keep thinking, am I going to publish or not? Because I'm not really sure. Like, it's referencing all this art, and there's no way for me to really go back and see, all the artists that I've taken that, or the fact that I didn't hire an artist, and so even I struggle with that with my creativity. Like, I'm not the best artist, but we have this in our minds, in our brains, me and my daughter. So we tell her, what we want, and the output comes out. But, it's that balance. It's still my ideas, but I didn't do any of the art. So definitely something that we should keep thinking. It should worry me. That should be an ethical thing. And I hope it is for our students as well.
Yeah, just wrestling with that. The other thing about this question, and Alec, I want to come to you with this one too, but the other thing about this question is obviously it's framed around the negative side of things. But just on your point, Shelly, about access to creative expression is a second, and that lift in terms of confidence, in terms of what you're capable of, what you're able to explore, I think is a second order effect that's slightly more positive in terms of access to different types of artistic or creative expression that we wouldn't be able to access in any other way. There's areas of, art and kind of things that we can create that might, for some students, including us, might be like a block that we wish we could, but we can't. And being able to kind of interact in a completely different way with that same artistic expression is increasing access to some of that. Whether we think that's the right type of access or even the right type of expression is a different question, but it is increasing access. Like you say, you know, you're not necessarily the greatest artist, but you're able to use tools in a way that gets you to a result that has the same type of intent and impact. So I just think that's a really interesting positive second order effect potentially of increasing access. And I've certainly heard that from you know, heads of department of some schools I've been working with, who kind of say that this is giving some students the chance to explore these artistic kind of areas of expression in new ways that they never would have been able to do before. So Shelly, thank you. I'm interested to see what happens with that book, whether it goes forever unpublished.
I was going to just bring up really quick. One of the first things I heard about ChatGPT's use was 11-year-old who actually made a text-based game that was with help with AI, and he went viral based on Harry Potter. So definitely what you just said as a positive, that was one of the things that excited me about you know, experimenting and checking out all the tools and everything.
Alec, what are your thoughts? What are you paying attention to? I mean, you're in your role, you have both sort of teaching, but you also have, you know, whole system, whole organization leadership in your kind of purview. What sort of things are you kind of paying attention to and potential harms?
Well, I'm also a teacher educator, and one of the things that I'm thinking about probably, and plus I have small children still, I'm thinking about cognitive atrophy, thinking about what we don't teach our kids now because we think that AI is replacing it. You know, we might get lazy or feel that it's not as necessary before. So what does it actually mean to the developmental, psychological, mental development of our children, and what that might mean long term? And I think we're only seeing the very beginning of this, and I don't see this rush of psychologists or others coming in to say, like, we need to rethink and adapt curriculum to some extent, because if we use these particular practices, we have some risk of hurting our children more. And there's already been, you know, a dip with COVID and literacy and so on. We've already seen that issue. And we add this to the tail end of that. We bring in these new, you know, perhaps shortcuts to some literacy when we're not writing outlines, when we're not writing prose in the same way we're doing. So I think we have to be very cautious about that. And of course, I did speak about the financial and economic effects. And I think, you know, all of, you know, I had someone that I know, you know, lost a position, and you know, and I saw, you know, from the institution that let the person go, they said something like, you know, it's just a small cut, but we're trying to, you know, keep things normal. And the person responded with something like, I'm not small. Like, like every single person that loses a job here, we have to be thoughtful of. And I think it's incredibly important to think about it that way. It's not like we're only going to reduce so many positions. We have to really think about this long term, because there are going to be a lot of people hurt in the short run, and the rest of us will scream, look how productive we are. That productivity we bring into our space means someone else that can't be our colleague. And so I think we have to be very cautious about what we do with that extra productivity, how we can redefine it. In schools, of course, that means that should be more time with kids. That should not be reductions in positions. So I guess in terms of like, how do we actually enact curriculum in a way that is thoughtful and understanding of cognitive development of kids, to, you know, having the staff and not letting the opportunism that comes into with institutions to see that we can make a lot of money on this transition versus actually make it more important and better to teach children in a holistic and new way. And I think there's great things that we can do with, like, one of the greatest things I've done with my kid, for instance, you know, there's a kind of a trope in old movies where you have sort of a scene at the beginning, and then it's like the narrator says something like, and I guess you'll never guess where I got to this point, and to find out more, we have to go back to the beginning. And my kid loves that. So we wrote a story about him and how he was bad like dinosaurs, and how we found this whole creation story with him. And I've never seen him so happy to read in my life, because it was about him, and he's been a struggling reader for such a long time. So there are ways of do that, but that wasn't AI. That was AI and me and him. Like, that was a us together with AI. And I think we have to be really thoughtful about how we use it. And it's not removing the person from that, the teacher from that. It's working along with the AI. And I think we have to be very thoughtful about how we introduce that in classroom. And when we do it well, we'll do it incredibly well.
Yes. Yeah, staying in the loop, working with the most capable, powerful tools that are sort of safe and appropriate for those sorts of times. I'm going to just encouraging everybody who's still with us. If you have any kind of questions for Alec and Shelly or myself, then this is a time to kind of throw them in the chat. We're going to finish, I think, here, Alec and Shelly, with some questions from everybody, just to explore a little bit. Let's have a look at this one from Mary Beth, who's curious what you think about the nuance of direct copy and paste from generative AI versus using AI to iterate. Shelly, what are your thoughts here about just that wrestle with, being able to kind of use it as a support or using it as a much more kind of intricate kind of process of creativity?
So I think we will see more copy and paste if we don't have facilitate that journey for students, or we don't have, and I always say with any kind of technology, every day also has to be that reflection. What do we do with the AI? What does it mean about the world, your future? What are some ethical considerations? So kids copy and paste right now, Wikipedia, Google, anything. They do it because of a need, like Alec was saying. Either there's so much pressure and there's that competition, so that's why, someone just doesn't say, "Oh, there's an AI tool I can cheat with. I'm going to go ahead and cheat with it." There are systematic issues there. Their system, we're giving them too much homework, or there's too much of that competition. We didn't address something else, or they don't feel up to the task. They feel like they weren't given the supports to do that. So more student choice, things like that. And then I think just back what you were saying, Tom, that whole, how do we do say it in our own work? If we model it 60%, 40%, I used AI to come up with my title, but I gave it a title, how do I express that in words, versus, but I wrote the blog post myself, or the presentation is mine, but I did use it because I'm not great at titles. So I think definitely if more copy and paste is if we're not having these discussions, but finding a better way to show that iteration and stuff is definitely going to come about with these discussions.
Yeah, perhaps our where the actual practical innovation is less to do with the technology and actually more to do with the way that we talk about the technology. Like, we actually need those frameworks. Those are obviously missing. And what we're doing is the audience, whoever that audience might be, is left wondering, is this real? Is this from this person? Where is this from? And that is not, a great way to create and kind of express ideas into the world. And so we're trying to figure out what that innovation is in terms of a practical structure to show provenance, I think is really important. Alec, have you got anything else to add to this? Otherwise, I've got another question for you.
Sure. Quickly, I'll just add, I've got a Google Doc here. And if you look for, do a Control F and look for Foucault, there's an example of some iterative prompting. And thanks for the question, Mary Beth. So I just show a really rough example about whether or not, so if you put in a basic prompt, like, I want you to write an outline of a paper about the concept of surveillance in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and you get a paper, that's one thing. But if you use the iterative prompting, like the quality of output is going to be so much better. And I think to get that quality of output, you need to know some subject matter. That's a very simplistic example. The more you push it and the more it becomes part of what you're doing, it becomes your originality, your creativity. And so I think the iterative piece is something that we need to teach. And so I see it out there as either iterative prompting or incremental prompting, and those are slightly different processes. But I think these are really important prompting practices that we bring in that can show creativity, that can bring in originality to the prompts and to the output ultimately. And so in many ways, I think it becomes more you and more the writer's the more writers and originality when we actually look at the output. And of course, from there, there's the product, but of course, then you can move and work it, do whatever you would like to do it manually to make it even better and to make it even more yours. But I think at the very least, I think the iterative or incremental prompting is really important.
Yes, the process over product potentially as well, the kind of shift towards a much broader set of information about how did you get to here. I know that I had a teacher contact me saying they're using a particular Chrome plugin for docs, which enables them to see, the kind of changes. I think it's more than just tracking changes. I'm fascinated to see where some of this goes, but also hear what Mary Beth is referring to is specifically around student behavior too. And so how do we help them and build their skills and dispositions to understand what's needed at those particular points when they're creating, when they're publishing? Can they tell the story of how they got to here? Can they explain and show the steps? Can they also see there's great value in expressing the iterative work as much as the product? Let's just squeeze in one more question and then we're going to wrap up. And so Tavia mentioned about the digital divide. And I just want us to also share, I'd be happy to hear a couple of quick thoughts from you, Alec and Shelly, about issues around blocking, but also issues around access and, broader kind of issues around equity, not least with our students. This is also to do with the communities that we're serving, the infrastructure, the capabilities that they have to be able to kind of get into this and use these powerful tools. Shelly, do you want to just kick us off? What are some of the things you're thinking about here in regards to the digital divide or access?
Well, I want to say thanks to Tavia because she's put a lot of great points about this inside the chat as well. But definitely, I think there is this digital divide, not only for teachers and students, but when we block, we don't allow any kind of growth or knowledge. So I really like that we have these, Tom, that you have these free discussions because there's a lot of teachers out there who are not even trying. And if they don't even get interested in try or they're too scared, they don't get any training, then they don't know how to pull that into the curriculum. So I think it's really important, these conversations and resources that we have, because ultimately with the teachers and they're going to be able to break that digital divide. When I got into it and experimented because I love technology and just being out there and helping who I can. Then I introduced it to my students they're in areas with high drug addiction. A lot of them truancy. The ones I worked with this year, extremely tough. And that was a way for them. They got to do a lot of things. Just basic stuff for now, writing, research, being able to do some jumping into it and just thought, hey, it's cool. And this is what I heard about this and miss. So I think that definitely as teachers, we kind of unfortunately are the ones who are gonna, if we learn about this and we don't get too scared with it, then we will be the ones to introduce it to students who may not otherwise ever get to play with it.
Yeah, an important role of teacher as innovator, which is added pressure. But if we have some, will and capability, there is an important thing about staying connected and connecting with others who are kind of on this journey, isn't there? Alec, what's your kind of last word here, if you don't mind, about the digital divide, stuff to do with access?
Yeah, there's two pieces I think here. So digital divide in terms of access to the technology itself, of course, will be something. Right now I can run an open source, no guardrails version of Llama or something else on my computer that will be close to the same, to power as something like GPT-3. And that's quite amazing that I'm running it locally on my computer and it has no restrictions. But I have to have the machine for that, and it's fairly expensive. And of course, your GPT Plus and your premium accounts for every one of these tools is going to provide someone with an advantage over others. And so the cost issue, it certainly in the near term is going to be an issue. But of course, having the access to teachers and tutors and small classes and all of the other things that are really important here, and that the proper training to teachers to provide them with the best understanding of how to use AI rather than using it recklessly, that's always going to be an issue as well. So having proper staffing, smaller classrooms, all of the things that really held true before AI are just as true now, even if we have personalized bots and so on. I think the idea of having those teachers as a way of supervising AI in the classroom is going to be really important. Students can't always do it themselves, so supervision is going to be a really important piece of all of this.
Yes, and it feels like some of the capabilities are sort of running and developing faster than the ways that we can potentially respond. So Tavia referring in that question and provocation for us around the need and desire for structured ways to learn, to support my own professional growth, my connections with others, my understanding and experimentation, and how do I kind of do that in a way that's supported. Those mechanisms aren't necessarily there. There might be stuff that's also established around digital capabilities at a broader level. But it's just interesting to think about how the pace of development is outstripping our ability to respond. And so I think that trying to disconnect elements of our system enough to be able to kind of work in a more flexible, rapid way. Because one thing I know is that there's a key capability of us being able to work in this space at the moment is a high appetite for ambiguity. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so that capability of ours to be able to actually stay in that space and be willing to just explore and experiment, sense make, without clarity about answers is actually quite disconcerting for some. And that's a key capability that helps people, I think. And I think that uncertainty is going to continue because of the rapid pace of change. So what we should be doing is looking for things that are still the same. So you look for stability. It's like a kind of response, mitigating kind of ambiguity with the things in our system which are actually much more stable, things that are kind of core values that haven't sort of shifted. These are elements of our practice pedagogically that are still sound. Despite the redefinition, there are still things that are still true. And I think that's something that we've got to continue to stay connected to. All right, so Alec and Shelly, I've kept you long enough. We are over time. And so I just wanted to say a huge thanks to everybody who's still with us at the moment. Great, thank you for all your comments and questions in the chat. It's been great to have you join us for today's session. Shelly, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Great. It's been lovely to hear your perspectives and the work that you're doing. I know that you're traveling around supporting people with some of these topics. And so, yeah, I hope that maybe we can kind of get you back on to kind of hear some of the tales from the road, what's going on. So Shelly, really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
And thank you. And also I would like to shout out, I know that those registered get your newsletter, the prompt. So definitely, I think that's a great weekly, resource as well.
Great. Thank you so much for giving it a shout. Alec, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really grateful for you jumping on and sharing your thoughts.
It was great. Thank you for the invite again. And thanks for inviting me with Shelly. It was great to reconnect with Shelly again as well. And I was going to also plug your newsletter. It's been a great source of information, and I regularly read it, and it's a great way of keeping up to date on a lot of what's going on in the sector. And it's a lot of the information there has made it into the materials that I'm producing as well. So it's great to have that resource. Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, no problem. So Prompt Craft every Monday is just a wrap up of what's been going on. And so lots of stuff in there is trying to kind of keep it quite practical. Excellent. Glad it's helping. Glad it's useful. So this is the 10th dialogue session. And so we're in season 3. They renewed they renewed the season, so I'm still going. I think I've got 2, maybe 3 more to do this in this term. And so we'll be connecting with some colleagues over in the UAE. I think it's Dr. Neil Hopkin and Chris Buswell, who will be in session 11. And I'm going to see if I can also weave in some times for other time zones as well, as long as I can get the kind of details right this time. All right, folks, that's us out for today. Thanks so much. And yeah, we'll see you in the next session.